Hello, guys. I hope you're all fine and are far, far away from the current COVID situation and everything. I also hope you've enjoyed the previous videos we uploaded on the website on different aspects of IR, international political economy, and economics itself. In this video, I'm going to talk about something really interesting, something that is probably the most important aspect of social science. Well, not all social science, economics, and political science, those aspects, which is policies. What is a policy? Well, why do we have a government? Huh? Why do you think we have a government? Why should we have a government? What are the government's duties? If you recall, I did talk about market failure, the public good, and externalities, and several other reasons for which the presence of a government was necessary in order to make sure the economy works as a whole and not as a diversified, scattered entity. But what does the government do? What is that thing that the government does? Well, in economics lingo, what we call it is policy. Well, some would say it's public policy because government is also called the public sector. But anyways, it's basically policy, and it means any action that any governmental entity takes intentionally to exert any form of change in the common order. So let's say I am the government, and whatever I do in order to change what is happening at the moment will be considered a policy. But uh, why would they do that? Well, for starters, there was this guy named Adam Smith in the 18, I think in the 17th century. He wrote a book called Wealth of Nations. In that book, he claimed that there is something called the invisible hand of the market, and if you let everything to their own devices, well, basically everything will be as it should be. So you do not need to do anything. Everything will fix themselves. Well, quite frankly, when he wrote that book, everything was okay. That's actually one of the biggest mistakes almost any big name in social science has made. And that's the fact that since in their time everything is okay, they believe that their situation and the situation at their time is the ideal situation. So they claim it to be the universal solution to every problem. During Adam Smith, uh, productivity was increasing exponentially, life standards were increasing exponentially, everything was getting better and better on its own. So he thought, yeah, that's right. We leave it to the invisible hand of the market economy. But that wasn't true always. In 1930s, 1929, 1931, during that time, suddenly the whole economy crashed. Suddenly the market economy just went down the hill. It just dropped dead. And it was so massive that up to this point it is called the Great Depression. It's one of the biggest unexplained events of uh, all times. Still, to this point, nobody has a reliable explanation for why it happened. Different scientists and different scholars tried to explain the reasons behind this massive downturn, but none of them were really successful. Anyways, at that time, there came this new scholar named John Maynard Keynes, and he published a book called The General Theory of Employment, Money and Interest. In that book, he actually showed that government cannot stay in the sidelines. The government needs to do something. If you leave the market on its own, it will fail. And in that failure, people will pay the price. You need someone called the government to come in and interfere and help, to be the employer of the last resort. The very example of this kind of intervention is the shoveling experience, in which there are two people and they each have a shovel. One of them digs a hole, the other one fills the hole. Nothing changes, but you have two people who are being paid for doing a job. In other words, you are decreasing the number of unemployed people by 2. So, and it has no profit. So no company, no organization, no firm will actually conduct such a thing. So you need a government which is not looking for profit to conduct such a policy. We call these kind of policies public works policies. They are government's endeavors in creating meaningless jobs that only give you a purpose because they give you something to do, and then you will get paid for doing that something, nothing more. And the only entity in social life which is capable and also willing to do such a thing is the government. Anyways, the policies that governments conduct can be divided into two main categories: monetary policies and fiscal policies. You see, in everyday discussions and in everyday talks, we talk about the government as this big, bad, big and strong and powerful entity that can do anything and has limitless resources and everything. But the truth is, the tools a government has to conduct policies is not more than the fingers of one hand. In monetary policy, they actually change the situation of the economy by changing the amount of money, the amount of cash inside the economy. If there are more cash in the economy, if access to cash is easier in an economy, well, production could go up. Why? Because let's say we have so many ideas, but we do not have enough funds to support those ideas financially. Then the government gives out more cash. Well, now it's easier to access funds, so the investors will conduct more projects. That means more production, that means more employment, that means more growth. Or instead of publishing new bills, new money bills, and new notes, instead they decrease the interest rate. The interest rate is the price of investment, right? You take loans from the bank for interest. So if we lower the interest, it's cheaper to take loans. So more people will take loans and they will use those loans to conduct productive endeavors. However, when you are implementing a monetary policy in forms of increasing employment and increasing uh, production, you will also increase prices. That is a byproduct of demand side policies that are aimed at fighting recessions. Even fiscal policies are the same. But our fiscal policies, just like I said, the public work policy I just talked about, a government is spending more on some projects that are solely objected towards, that have the sole goal of increasing production and productivity and economic growth. These are the policies that the governments take to improve the economy. However, they have a byproduct, and that is inflation. So what I am trying to tell you right now is the fact that there is no best solution. And whatever you do, it has a cost. Just like Milton Friedman says, there is no such thing as a free lunch. You actually need to accept that whatever you do, it has a cost. Take your daily life, for instance. You want to enjoy your day and watch something, a movie or something. Well, that means you should, or let's say you want to write your homework, you want to write your term paper. Well, in order to do that, you have to spend less time watching movies or playing video games. So you are paying a price. You are substituting the pleasure of games and movies with the hardship of doing your homework, because your goal is to get an A in your class. So that's one important aspect you have to take into account whenever you are considering policies. But policies don't always succeed. In the 1980s, a new economic disease actually started. The economists call it stagflation. Some countries, some states experienced inflation and unemployment at the same time. And up to that point, it seemed impossible. But then it suddenly became probable and actually happened. Why? Well, public policy not always succeeds, and it fails for different reasons. First off, it takes time to conduct a policy. Let's say there is a problem in your society. It takes time to understand that problem fully. And by the time you understand that problem, the problem might have changed. It takes time to design a proper policy to face that problem. By the time you finish designing your policy, the problem might have changed. It takes time to conduct a policy. By the time you're conducting the policy, the problem might be totally different. So one key reason for policies to fail is timing. Many policies up to this point ignored this big issue. They did not take into account the fact that there is a gap between figuring out a problem and conducting its solution. And they did not take that into consideration when they were designing their policies. Another thing is, another reason for policies to fail is weak governmental structures, corrupted bureaucracies. These are big issues. Let's say you want to improve the livelihood of the poor. So You write a proposal, get a loan from the World Bank, and the loan is like 2 billion US dollars, but only 200 million dollars gets to the poor. The rest, the 1 billion and 800 million dollars, were were actually consumed by corrupt bureaucrats, by corrupt state officials. They actually just took it from them, from you, and from the poor. So one of the big reasons for policies to fail is the existence of corruption. Something very, very devastating that you can see in many different places. Another reason for policies to fail would be the poor design of a targeting procedure. You want to improve the livelihood of the poor, but who is considered poor? How do you define poor? Where are they? How do you find them? Many policies don't take into consideration these aspects, and they make a poor judgment. For example, they say, okay, the poor are those who live in that area. Well, when the policy starts, some opportunists will reside in those areas to gain from that policy, even though they don't really need to better their livelihoods. So targeting is another aspect of policies that needs to be exact and needs to be quite accurate. Otherwise, you will fail to gain the objectives of your policies. Okay, to sum it up, we have two main forms of policies: demand side policies and supply side policies. In this video, I talked about demand side policies and their effects. Also, I talked about the spillover effects of some policies which are unwanted effects and aspects that we just have to accept as byproducts of our policies. But the most important part is the fact that you have to be accurate. Define the problem as accurate as possible, in as more details as possible. Then design the policy based on those details. And remember, in your policy, make sure to know where you get your funds, who are you targeting, how are you targeting them, and how you will test the results of your policy. How will you check to see if your policy was successful or not? And that's that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you got interested in learning more about policies.